Hello everyone, my name is Marcus Lim. I'm CEO and co-founder of Zipmex. In this session, we'll be talking about Bitcoin's adoption in Southeast Asia. As crypto adoption takes off around the world, Southeast Asia has become a hub for crypto users. Local digital asset exchanges are springing up to meet historic demand across the region. In Vietnam, for example, there have been reports that over 41% of its population is already invested in cryptocurrency. In Singapore, there's a survey stated that 2/3 of the young Singaporeans own some crypto. In Indonesia, as of July 2021, the number of crypto investors has reached 7.4 million people. The crypto transaction value in Indonesia reached over $34 billion, increased 5 times compared to last year. While adoption in North America, Western Europe, and Eastern Asia over the last year has been powered largely by institutional investors in emerging markets, many turn to cryptocurrency to preserve their savings in the face of currency devaluation, send and receive remittances, and carry out business transactions. Despite the surging demand, Southeast Asian governments have turned their screws on the world's largest crypto exchange, Binance, as it failed to acquire the relevant licenses in various countries. This, however, offers a chance for local licensed exchanges to fill the gap, but this must be done quickly. Cryptocurrencies are here to stay, and it is of the utmost importance that Indonesian regulators keep up with the pace of innovation. Indonesia can certainly benefit from clearer regulation clarity, be it from spot markets, derivatives such as futures and options markets, as well as borrowing and lending markets. This will set the pathway for more Indonesian institutions to adopt blockchain technology sooner than later. Thailand and Singapore are two of the most advanced countries when it comes to crypto regulations, and is a strong reason why Indonesia should follow their footsteps. Fortunately, the government of Indonesia is aware of it, so they are planning to make a crypto exchange in Indonesia that will be launched at the end of the year latest. Thailand is leading the charge in Southeast Asia when it comes to Bitcoin adoption. One of the most notable and ambitious was made by Jasmine Telecom System. The president of Jasmine Telecom Systems has outlined how he plans to make the Thai operator the largest Bitcoin miner in the Asean region by 2024. At a time when a growing number of telcos are exploring blockchain, but few are looking at cryptocurrency. JTS has announced plans to install 500 Bitcoin mining machines at its Gestel data center over the course of Q4 this year. In 2022, JTS will scale its mining operation tenfold, installing a further 5,000 machines in partnership with the Gestel network at industrial locations around Thailand. According to the reports, the phase after this will see JTS bring 50,000 machines online, scaling its operations 100-fold before the next Bitcoin halving. The halving occurs roughly every 4 years, or once every 210,000 blocks, and is next scheduled for 2024. The machine will generate 5 exahashes of power onto the network and will make JTS the biggest Bitcoin mining operations in Southeast Asia. At this scale, JTS could mine about 16,000 Bitcoins per year. Despite the market volatility, decentralized finance has gained traction in Southeast Asia. This is especially the case in Indonesia, the largest economy in the region. With around 7.4 million crypto investors in the country as of July, crypto assets have become the most popular investment class according to the Ministry of Trade. we've already started seeing big countries like Indonesia announce it has no plans to follow China in banning cryptocurrencies. This is an example of a great turnaround event from Indonesian hostile stance back in 2017. Not only Indonesia will not follow China's footsteps in banning all cryptocurrency transactions outright, but is also looking into ways to make them less prone to being used in illegal financial activities. Minister of Trade Muhammad Lutfi said the government of Indonesia does not prohibit crypto as an investment, but tightens the regulations. Cryptocurrencies trade in Indonesia has been flourishing in the past 18 months. The Futures Exchange Supervisory Board, FFD, showed total cryptocurrencies transactions in 13 local exchanges that the board approves to operate in Indonesia had grown 40% to 370 trillion rupiah in the first 5 months this year, from 65 trillion for the entire 2020. The number of individuals involving in the crypto asset transactions has also gone up 6.5 million in May, from 4 million at the end of last year. In comparison, the number of investors in Indonesia Stock Exchange was only 5.6 million at the end of June 2021. Many of the local crypto exchanges in the country said they are confident of doubling or tripling the number of investors on their platform in the near future. The growth is simply phenomenal. With such a strong trend of adoption, the future of cryptocurrencies gets clearer and clearer by the day. Certainly, there is a strong potential that Bitcoin can one day be accepted as payment, as we've seen in countries like El Salvador and Brazil leading the charge. However, we have yet to see this happen in Southeast Asian countries.
Thank you so much, Marcus, for your video for explaining about the potential adoption for Bitcoin in Southeast Asia. And then now we will, having more discussion, more in-depth discussion from your video before. But before we go deep into the conversation, why don't we start with your Bitcoin story, Marcus?
Sure, definitely. Thanks, Zia, for having me today. I'm really excited to be here, on a Saturday or rather kind of Sunday afternoon, talking about Bitcoin. My Bitcoin story really kind of started back in, 2014, whereby, I ran a tech company previously in Australia called OneFlare, and, a bunch of my engineers were actually mining Bitcoin, in the office, and I wasn't actually sure what was actually happening. So that was when I was first kind of discovering properly about Bitcoin. And I have a really close family friend, in 2016, and he was, back then he was the CTO for BitGo, which is the largest custodian for digital assets in the world, and that got recently bought by Galaxy. And he really kind of introduced me into Bitcoin and also more broadly kind of blockchain and cryptocurrency. So that's where I really kind of got a much closer look into it and started actually investing at that point in time. And what I saw was, there's a huge potential here for kind of a global currency that is decentralized, immutable, and also not owned by anyone. So the beauty about Bitcoin is that it's not owned by anyone, it's owned by everyone. It also, transcends the ability for fractional ownership, where you don't have to own a whole Bitcoin right now. You can own, 1/1,000,000th of a Bitcoin. So I saw this huge potential there. And, and in 2018, I saw that, countries were starting to regulate, exchanges. And that's where, Thailand was the first country in Southeast Asia to come out with regulation. It's called a 100-page royal decree. And that's where I went over to Bangkok. I met my co-founder, and that's how I started Zipmex, back in kind of late 2018, early 2019. So the story, and the journey has been incredible. I'm a big believer in Bitcoin. I have, since last year, after the pandemic happened, a lot of people invested in the stock market, and so did I. But what I started to see, and including myself, is that transition away from investing in the stock market into, into Bitcoin and the crypto market more generally. So it has been an exciting journey, and I think there's a lot more to go.
Exciting. That's very exciting. So, and I know that Zipmex as well have not only, Zipmex Indonesia, you guys are all over Southeast Asia, right? So, what do you think is like the significance of the ASEAN market for the crypto and for Bitcoin adoption?
Yeah, definitely. I think for the ASEAN market in general, and probably perhaps not so much Singapore, is that there is this whole, topic and also push for financial inclusion, right? And financial inclusion does not just purely mean banking the unbanked. Banking the unbanked has always been, an objective by the Indonesian government and also the Thai government. And obviously, we know a lot of the benefits of being banked, but financial inclusion is really also encapsulating all finance, everything to do with finance, everything to do with money, right? And I think this is the important part. And why it's so important in ASEAN is because for so long historically, right, people, the masses, never had access, to basic kind of financial services, right? Like opening a bank account is one, right? But being able to invest in a secure and, in a proper manner, right, had not been afforded to the masses, right? And I think where Bitcoin and where kind of, cryptocurrency ecosystem players can come in is to provide that infrastructure, right, to give people that access, which is extremely important, right, to educate them, right, of, what the benefits are. As we know, with the shift in paradigm of technology from the internet now to blockchain and cryptocurrency, it is important, right, to be involved at the early stages, right? And as you see the whole ecosystem, and space develop over time as well. So, how we have kind of gone in, right, is to be regulated first and foremost, because we see that this is an important step to gain trust, not just with the regulators, but also with the people, to know that we are good actors, not bad actors in the ecosystem. So we want to make that distinction fairly, fairly clear, because ultimately what we are is we're going to be dealing with people's finances, people's wealth, right? And helping them to generate that wealth over time. And I think this whole concept of financial inclusion is extremely important because there exists a huge income inequality in Indonesia, in Southeast Asia in general, right? And how do we help the masses to generate wealth, to close that income inequality gaps? And we all know what the problems are for income inequality. So this whole concept of Bitcoin being decentralized, right? That giving everyone has that power, right? And that flexibility to put in as much or as little as they want to investing, right? Is tremendous.
Yeah. I totally agree. Like for me as Indonesian as well, it's very hard if I want to invest in the blue chip stock market, for example. Like, oh yeah, even if I have the money, the access to go there is so hard. But me, I can also invest on Bitcoin the same like, I don't know, maybe Warren Buffett or the same kind of people in the what is Wall Street. So yeah.
Exactly, and actually, dear, you touched on a very important point. Is that traditionally in the Indonesian stock market, right, investors had to buy lots of shares, right, and lots of 500, for example. And if you look at the typical, I guess, disposable income or disposable amount for Indonesians to invest in, right? It becomes very difficult to construct a diversified portfolio. Now, when we learn in Finance 101 is you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket, right? You should always diversify, right? And there's a lot of benefits to diversification. And the issue is, to be able to buy BCA stocks, to be able to buy, P&G stocks, right? To be able to buy kind of top 10, top 50 market cap stocks in Indonesia is very difficult because of the whole issue of the lots, right, for the masses. Now, then comes crypto, right? Comes Bitcoin. And Bitcoin says, you know what? You can own as little as $1, or you can own as much as $1 million, right? So this ability to be able to invest as small or as much as you can, right, together with, you know, all the famous investors around the world, right, equalizes that opportunity for everyone. And really what it comes down to is the empowerment of individuals and their ability to invest. And that is so important.
Awesome. And I also seen the presentation that you mentioned, 41% of Vietnamese own crypto. I think it's much bigger than Indonesian percentages. So what do you think is the reason behind this?
Yeah, look, the primary reason behind why crypto adoption is so high in Vietnam is because it started with remittances and the issue with remittances, right? Vietnamese dong is probably one of the most controlled currencies, which has very, with a lot of kind of challenges to be able to kind of remit out into kind of G10 currencies. And so Bitcoin, and of course, like, you know, there are a lot of transaction fees, and there's, you know, these brokers take a huge spread. With Bitcoin and with crypto, there's instant settlement, right? Transaction fees are almost zero, right? And it's super portable, right? So you can send it to anywhere around the world. And so with a lot of Vietnamese that are offshore and also onshore, the ability to kind of send and receive money is an extremely important part. Similar to the Philippines and also in Indonesia, where you have a lot of foreign workers, right? But these kind of corridors for remittances for Philippines and Indonesia are a lot more established, whereas for Vietnam is not as established. So people have found ways, right, to be able to remit value off cross-border, right, through Bitcoin. And that's how it really kind of started, right, as a problem that has to be solved within the country. And then from there, you know, the individuals and the masses within Vietnam, right, recognizes the actual power of blockchain and also the investment of digital assets, right? And that's where the adoption really kicked off.
So it's almost similar like El Salvador, where it started from the remittances from people, you know, abroad, from it, who's migrant worker who works in abroad, and then they need to send money to people at home. So yeah, it's completely game changing in comparison to traditional banking system, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, what we see with Latin America is that the sovereignty of currency, local currency, right, is very volatile, right? So, you know, when there's a pandemic that happens, or when there's, you know, some crisis that happens, right, within the country or surrounding countries, you see that there's a lot of volatility in the currency, and the volatility in the currency is not good. Plain reason is because of imports and exports. How do people determine prices, and how can I pay for something today with a loaf of bread, and tomorrow it's going to cost me 10 times more, right? There is no certainty. So with Latin America, in terms of how, like, you know, El Salvador specifically, how they're starting to adopt Bitcoin as a legal tender, and that's because it's really kind of, you know, what they're trying to diversify away from their actual local currency, right, which has, you know, issues from time to time, is something that's a bit more well backed, right? It's a global currency, right? Cannot be manipulated, right? Has no sovereignty, which is the very interesting part, meaning to say there's no central government, right? So as an extension to the remittance problem that we see in Vietnam, right, this is also another avenue in which people can say, look, you know, I may not want to hold my local currency because I don't know what may happen tomorrow, but if I hold Bitcoin, right, which, you know, everyone else in the world does, right, this is something that could be a store of value for me, right, into the future. And on top of that, as an investment vehicle.
Okay. Yeah, that's totally true. That's why Bitcoin is so famous. I feel like it's getting really popular in the developing countries. And I want to tell to the audience, don't forget, this is a live Q&A. So if you have any question, just write the question in the chat box. And then later we will pass it on to Marcus. So Marcus, I also want to ask you about, specifically about Zipmex, because Zipmex is, I think, is everywhere around ASEAN and the world as well. But because we are talking about Southeast Asia right now, what is your plan? What is Zipmex plan in the ASEAN region? Like, what makes you different from the other crypto exchanges?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the way I see Zipmex, right, as a vehicle, right, in ASEAN, right, and just kind of take out, we as a business or cryptocurrency in general, but we see Zipmex as a vehicle in ASEAN because traditionally, if you look at, the last 50 years, right, we've formed ASEAN, right, which is all these neighboring countries in Southeast Asia, right, and we work together, right, in combination with, kind of the Europeans or the Americans, right, but ultimately we are all neighbors, right, and we have to collaborate together to make, whatever economic or social policy work, right, and this is a really important part. And how this kind of relates to Zipmex is that I feel ultimately, right, the whole idea of digital assets being kind of borderless, right, but also we need to work together within the neighboring countries to make this work, not just for Thailand, not just for Indonesia, but I see a much broader vision for it to work for all of Southeast Asia, right? And so when we started off with this journey, we wanted Zipmex to be regional. And as you can see, we're not focused on being, regulated in France or in the US or in South America or in Africa, right? We only focus in Southeast Asia, right? And that's because we think that there is a lot of benefits with cohesing all the neighboring countries in Southeast Asia. And so as a first step, as I mentioned, we wanted to be regulated. So we work with all the regulators. And this is the really interesting part because we're one of the only exchanges that work with multi-regulators in this region, understanding what do they want to see in this space, and also more importantly, educating them about this space, because regulators are still normal people like us, right? Mm-hmm. They're not some divine being that knows everything, right? They're still learning about the space and they still need to kind of catch up. And we can be the facilitators and educators to help them to better shape the regulation and policy around digital assets, which is fundamentally going to be very important, right, in terms of how the masses adopt digital assets.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And we have a very interesting question because we touch a little bit about regulation as well. So in here, someone from the audience asks, what is your view or Zipmex view regarding the Indonesia Bapepti plan to establish the Indonesia crypto exchange? Is it good or is it, what do you think?
Yeah, so look, I think if we look at regulation in general, regulation is good, right? Mm-hmm. But too much regulation, over-regulation is bad, right? Over-regulation stifles innovation. That is, the wisdom here. Yeah. And for Indonesia in general, I think, cryptocurrency has fallen under, right, Bapepti because it's considered as a commodity, right? Mm-hmm. And so the regulation, I think, is a progressive step by the government to recognize digital assets first and foremost, because it's not a physical commodity like iron ore, gold, tin, copper, right, which as Bapepti has traditionally kind of regulated. But now they're trying to regulate a commodity that's in digital form. There's no physical part to this. And so the progression here is good because, because the regulators of the government is taking this seriously, and it's important, right? Because there's a lot of adoption that's happening. There's 6.5 million accounts in Indonesia, right? And so the government needs to take a step up and say, look, we need to do something about this, right? Because as we all know, if nothing is done, bad actors will come in, right? Mm-hmm. People can't see the difference between the black and the white line, right? And on top of that, Indonesians, by the numbers, are voting by their feet to say we want digital assets, and this is why we have 6.5 million, crypto accounts versus 3 million stock brokerage accounts in Indonesia, right? Mm-hmm. So Indonesians are voting by their feet, right? And mm-hmm. so if the government comes in to provide proper guidance, then it provides a safer environment for people to invest. There's more certainty that this is not going to be banned the next day, like China, mm-hmm. where they come out and say, we're going to ban crypto. Everyone who owns crypto is going to go to jail, or it's illegal. And then everyone starts to fret and go, oh, what's going to happen to my investment? And then you can see, crypto prices drop. So regulation, again, is kind of very important, right? The key for the Indonesian government is to make sure that there is enough regulation in place, but not too much, right? Mm-hmm. Where this industry, and what happens, right, when you have over-regulation, right, is a black market happens, right?
True. Yeah.
right? With anything that we've seen, right?
Yeah.
And I don't have to mention what that is, right?
True. True.
So I think, there's a healthy way of regulating any space, and more specifically in this space. And the consciousness that the government needs to take note that it is a very, very new industry, right? It needs to take clear steps, and also considered ones, to not over-regulate it, right? To allow the whole innovation within this space to foster, right? Because if it doesn't, right, then it'll go somewhere else. And I think that in Indonesia, what we've seen over the last, 6-7 years since I first landed in Indonesia in 2016, is that Indonesia is becoming a tech hub, right? It is a tech hub, right, of Southeast Asia, right? And I think this is another part of it, right? From you've got your mobile penetration, internet penetration, you've got e-commerce, e-money, and then you've got the rise of the fintechs, right? So I see this as being super, super, super interesting. And of course, a lot of the the fintech players, and also a lot of the other kind of tech companies are regulated by other regulators within Indonesia. But this falls quite squarely within Bapepti. So it's super exciting. And I think, it's a huge challenge on their hand. And we were very prepared to work together with them to make this, a not just a 10-year kind of an industry, but the next kind of 100 years.
True. And I think I read somewhere, or at least what I see right now, is that it's too late to ban Bitcoin, right? For it, the market cap is already going up $1 trillion, almost 10% of the gold market cap. So it is for the benefit for the government to actually, embrace Bitcoin, and then also, work together with the user.
Absolutely. So look, the reality is you can't ban Bitcoin. We've seen it with China, right?
Yeah.
And it does nothing, right? And it's still resilient, right? So, and the reason why you can't ban it is because it exists on a network that it can't be controlled by one person. No central government can intervene, or government can intervene on the Bitcoin network to say that we're going to stop transactions happening in Indonesia. No, Bitcoin does not know borders, right? It's borderless, right? So as the saying goes, if you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you cannot stamp it out, then work together with it, right? Right.
Yeah.
And also see the positives and not just the negatives.
True, very much. And then we have a very interesting question here from Ronaldo Yolanda. He asked, Marcus, what do you think about Generation Z in Southeast Asia and the correlation to Bitcoin trends? If you have data, or what do you see as the Bitcoin adoption in the future?
So I think let's just kind of take a step back to our older generation, our parents' generation, and how investments have been done, right? So what do our parents invest in? Real estate, gold, perhaps also in traditional stock market, buying top market caps, like, in Indonesia would be, BCA, whether it's like all the top banks or Procter and Gamble, right?
Yeah.
And they have invested in them previously because A, they have better affiliation with physical assets, right? 2 is they have made money over time if they held on to those investments, right? There is now a huge inflection point which is happening, which is to say millennials don't really want to buy gold, right? They don't want to buy traditional asset classes that did not exist in the digital world, because the millennials and all the generations preceding after that, DA, whatever it is, right, is that they're all living in a digital world, right? Look at art now. Art has gone from physical for thousands of years. And now for the very first time, right, you can actually own art in the digital world, right? And I don't mean it as just a JPEG you copy and save it, right? I mean, you have something that actually shows clear provenance of ownership, the creator, right? The creator also being able to be remunerated for the art, consistently for the art that they actually sell. So what does it mean for this whole generation? Is that we live in the digital world. We don't care for, a lot of the physical assets. Sure, we still need a house and an apartment to stay in, right? But these physical forms do not really it does not really mean that much to us anymore, right? And a case in point is Bitcoin, right? And stemming from that, cryptocurrencies, and stemming from that, asset-backed tokens like NFTs. So I think there is a huge push towards that, right? And not to say that everything else will lose value, but I'm just saying that, with millennials and with all the, with the newer generation, they are all digital natives, right? And, assets that are digital mean a whole lot more to them than physical assets.
Yeah. And the previous speaker, Robert Breedlove, was talking about property rights, how it is actually just a piece of information. And then it's very beautiful that Bitcoin and, like all this crypto is basically, it's a digital information that cannot be confiscated, right? It cannot be taken away from you. It is just information. Even if you have a land ownership, it's still an information that I own this land from this point until this point. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what will be very, very interesting in the future, and I'm not sure how long Indonesia will take to get there, is having the title deeds on a blockchain, right? Where you can actually see the provenance of who owned what, and it cannot be corrupted, right? Dia, if you own property A and you sold it to me and I sold it to someone else, right? Somewhere along the lines that title deed could be changed, right? Because it's either in paper form, right, or in a centralized digital form, right, that can be hacked, right? But then on a blockchain, it cannot, is immutable, it cannot be hacked, right? And so that information will hold true for, forever, right? As long as that network is powering it.
Yeah, very much. We have another question. So maybe we will pick like 2 more questions before the closing.
Sure.
I see there is some question from, this Made Yeri. He asked, what are the risks of Bitcoin in general?
So I think firstly, there's still a lot of infrastructure development that needs to be had in terms of the storage of Bitcoin, right? And the ability to transfer Bitcoin. I think I'll start with these 2 things first because they're very basic, and a lot of people make mistakes on this, right? The way we send Bitcoin at the moment, right, is there's still a lot of risk, and the main risk is you send it to the wrong person, right? And then you lose it. There's no ability to kind of retract that transfer. Once it's sent, you confirm, and that's it, right? You could send it to the wrong person, send it to the wrong address, and then you can't get it back, right? Or rather, the chances of getting back is very difficult. So I think there's a lot of infrastructure there that kind of needs to be built in terms of the seamlessness of transfer, right? And so if in the future, if I send it to someone else and I'm not supposed to send it to that person, the ability to kind of draw it back as well, with certain parameters, I think, is important. The second one is around storage, right? Now, when we started, if you kind of look at the last bull run, everyone had ledger wallets or Trezors, and people were storing their assets off exchange because exchanges were getting hacked back then, and I think there's still risk of exchanges kind of getting hacked. Is that they were storing into these hardware wallets, and they would lose their secret key, their seeds, their seeds, and and basically they would will not be able to kind of retrieve that. So I think there's still also a lot of development that can go into actual cold or hard storage of Bitcoin or digital assets in general, right? The usability of it is still very clunky. Like, why do I have to put in an alphanumeric address, right? That is, super long. And what does that mean, right? What if I get one letter wrong and it's screwed, right? And I'm sending it to the wrong person. So I think the technology is definitely, the concept of the technology is definitely there, but the usability of that technology, right? And not just for Bitcoin, but other cryptocurrencies, right, is still not there yet, right? So those are kind of like, I guess, the kind of the user experience risk, I like to call it. Now, in terms of actual risk to Bitcoin, I think we all know that Bitcoin is still very volatile. There's no two ways about it, right? Now, if you kind of compare, I guess, Apple stock when it was a lot 10, 20 years ago, it was also very volatile. The truth of the reality is that things that are new, things that have a lot of potential take time to mature, right? And, at what point would Bitcoin become non-volatile? I don't know. I don't have the answer for that. But the risk of investing into Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies is there is a huge risk of volatility, right? And so I think as an investment portfolio, it's very difficult for a lot of people because they see that volatility on a day-to-day basis, right? Mm-hmm. And they could panic, when Bitcoin corrects, right? I think one of the beautiful things that come out of investing in Bitcoin is it teaches you about patience, right? It teaches you tremendous amount of patience because you can see, because for a lot of retail investors, they're all about making money. And I get it, right? People want to generate wealth and we're here to help them generate wealth. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, right, Bitcoin can correct tomorrow by 30% and no one can say no. It does it by itself, and it does. It has before, right? 10, 20%, 30%, right? And so when it corrects, I think, people will panic, they sell, right? And then they sell the wrong time and it goes back up and go, oh my God, I missed out. So I think what it really teaches you is patience, right? That you need to have a long-term plan, or at least a view of, how long you're going to hold it for, why you're holding it for, and you keep to that view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So hodl, diamond hand.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah. So Marcus, we are at the end of our session. So maybe any closing statement from you about ASEAN and Indonesia?
Yeah, look, I think the closing statement is, it is an extremely exciting time to be alive and also to be involved in digital assets. I feel that this industry can by far, supersede a lot of other, tech industries out there as well. I mean, case in point is Facebook recently came out to rebrand its entire company to called Meta, right? To encapsulate the virtual reality world. And there's no question what kind of virtual reality they are looking into, right? The largest bank in Thailand, Siam Commercial Bank, is delisting from the stock exchange of Thailand, right? To create a holding company so that it can actually be involved in the whole crypto space, right? So huge organizations that have existed for more than 100 years, or one of the largest companies that have existed for 20, 30 years, right? The largest social network in the world is gravitating towards this industry, right? And I feel that for ASEAN, right, it plays a very, very important role because of the number of people that we have in ASEAN, but also the development opportunities that it could bring to the masses, right? The whole financial inclusion, banking the unbanked, giving financial access, all of that, I think, is really at the start of this journey. And whether it's, now, or whether it's another industry that is on top of Bitcoin or crypto, right, that will bring it there, I think it's super, super exciting. And I'd like to see, where this industry heads, in the next 10 to 20 years.
Awesome. Well, that's really, really powerful message. And thank you so much, Marcus. It's been very pleasure to have you in this conference. And I hope we can see each other live maybe next year.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Sia, for having me today. Super exciting. And looking forward to the next session.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Globalisasi mendorong manusia menuju digitalisasi. Semua kegiatan dilakukan secara digital, termasuk transaksi finansial. Sesederhana membeli makan, bahkan membeli properti, investasi saham, dan lainnya dilakukan dengan mudah. Kesejahteraan dan kebebasan finansial sepertinya mudah didapatkan. Nyatanya, berbagai batasan menghambat orang mendapatkan akses untuk mencapai kesejahteraan tersebut. Digitalisasi juga membuahkan satu produk finansial, yaitu cryptocurrency atau aset kripto. Semenjak kemunculannya, cryptocurrency telah berkembang pesat. Secara keseluruhan, kapitalisasi pasar aset kripto sudah mencapai 2,6 miliar dolar. Setelah kemunculan Bitcoin, aset kripto pertama di dunia, jumlah koin dan token aset kripto sudah mencapai 6.000 di seluruh dunia. Dengan konsep desentralisasi, cryptocurrency membawa kesempatan baru menghilangkan batasan negara, institusi, dan perantara kepada dunia finansial. Kesejahteraan akhirnya bisa diakses oleh semua orang tanpa hambatan, tanpa batasan. Dengan semangat inilah pada tahun 2018 Zipmex berdiri. Zipmex adalah platform aset digital yang didirikan oleh Marcus Lim dan Akalar Pimwilai. Zipmex memiliki tujuan untuk meruntuhkan halangan, mengedukasi, memberi semangat, dan mensejahterakan orang dengan platform aset digital yang sudah terregulasi sepenuhnya. Saat ini, Zipmex sudah hadir di beberapa negara, yaitu di Thailand, Singapura, Australia, dan Indonesia. Di Indonesia, jumlah pengguna aset kripto mencapai 6,5 juta dengan nilai transaksi mencapai 370 triliun rupiah. Dengan jumlah transaksi yang sangat besar, tentu saja membutuhkan keamanan yang terjamin dan terpercaya. Sebagai platform aset digital yang aman dan terpercaya, Zipmex telah teregulasi